views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, employers are always squeezing the most they can out of their workers. But as an employee, you have rights that are protected by statute. From wage and hour laws to civil rights, you should know what your protections are. Today, we meet with an expert on set. Next, are you starting a business in New York City? Well, we will make sure you know everything you need to before you open your doors. And finally, if you are injured on the job, most of us know you can file for workers' compensation. But what about medical providers? What insurance will they accept? Do they have to? And what about your loss of earnings? How much will you be getting and for how long? We will learn more with an attorney on set. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. Hi, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, a live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Ask Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at Bronxnet.tv. Are you an employee who has been taken advantage of? What are your legal rights? Here to give us some insight is attorney Oscar Michelen. How are you doing, Oscar?
Good, David. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. All right, so let's get to the wage and hour issues. Most of the emails we get from our viewers have to do with overtime and not getting paid and minimum wage. Maybe you could start us a little bit from the beginning.
Sure. Well, both the federal government and New York State have very strict laws requiring employers to keep accurate time records and to pay their employees properly. So that includes paying them the minimum wage and paying them overtime when they work more than 40 hours per week, as well as paying them an extra hour if they work more than 10 hours in one consecutive day, called a spread of hours. Then obviously they can't discriminate against them based upon constitutionally protected statuses.
What seems to be, in your opinion, the most egregious thing that occurs with respect to employees? Does it happen in the restaurant business, someplace else? What do you usually
We
see?
see a lot in restaurants, car washes, drivers of limousine companies, private car services, where employees are paid a flat rate every week, the same rate, regardless of how many hours they work. And many times, those hours exceed 40. So first of all, they're supposed to be paid on an hourly basis, so they should get paid for every hour they work, even when they work less than 40 hours. And then secondly, if they work more than 40 hours, they're entitled to 1.5 times their hourly pay for every hour over 40.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So let's start with the overtime, because
Right.
that seems to be a real issue. Employers either have you come in early to open up beforehand and open up the shop, an hour early. You don't realize you're not really getting paid for that. And they have you stay late, and you don't even realize that you've been there a half an hour later, but this has been going on, every single day for 4 or 5 months. What can you do as an employee, and how do you even find out whether you are entitled to get something back?
The first thing you should do is if the employer is not keeping track of your hours, do what you can to keep track of your hours so you can show when you're coming in and when you're coming out. Secondly, both the Federal Department of Labor and the New York State Department of Labor have excellent websites, very easily accessible, where you have a number of forms in a variety of languages that can explain your rights to you, and it can get you head start as to what you're entitled to. And then, of course, lots of lawyers in the area who can help you with respect to your claims.
Now, the records that you're supposed to get on your own, hopefully somebody's watching right now and they realize, hey, wait a second, I haven't seen a pay stub, I don't know what is going on. Where do you even start? Because some of these companies don't have an HR department. Where do you even grab these things?
Right. Well, first of all, you have a cell phone. We see lots of employees who keep track of their time by taking a picture when they come in, by noting with a timestamp. You can also show how you're getting paid, take a picture of your pay receipt. But more importantly, it's actually the employer's obligation to have the record. So if the employee files a claim with the Department of Labor, either federal or state, and then the employer doesn't have the records to back up the time that they paid the employee, whatever the employee says is taken as true.
Really?
Yeah, so for employers, the larger message is make sure you're keeping track of your employees' hours. Otherwise, the employer could say you're working 70 hours.
And I know you've been on both sides of the fence
Sure.
here, okay, two different hats. So now you're wearing your employer hat.
Right.
Do you tell them to make sure that they, if they're using Paychecks or if they're using another company, that they keep the forms with them all the time? What's the best advice you can give to your mom and pop employer? I'm not talking about a McDonald's or somebody really big, somebody who's, day to day, they're doing it all themselves, really.
And 5 or less employees, let's put it that way. Yeah, you still have to keep records for 6 years. And you still have to keep records of pay to employees. So time records and payroll records must be maintained under state and federal law for a period of time. Federal 3 years, state 6 years. So that's the statute of limitations on wage claims. So it's very important you keep some records. They don't have to be perfect. You don't have to go to ADP, but just show that you're keeping track of their time and paying people what they worked for.
Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit because we've had a lot of requests. Let's talk about some of the other types of issues that come up as an employee, because this is really an employee-focused show,
right,
except for the part where we have somebody starting a business later, but we're really more about the employees here.
Right.
Okay. Race, gender, what are your rights, really?
Again, both in New York State and New York City, you're very well protected. The state has the Commission on Human Rights, and the city has the Human Rights Commission. You also have the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. State and city, you could file for sexual orientation, gender identity, race, any of those constitutionally protected statutes.
And here's the big question. Does it matter your immigration status?
Absolutely not.
Because that's what most people think.
Of course.
I'm not legal, there's an issue here, I don't want to say something, I'll be deported.
Especially with the current climate now, more so than ever, you could be deported for jaywalking now. So you have to be mindful that neither the federal government nor the state government will report your immigration status if you make a claim. And as a matter of fact, if you have a claim pending, you won't be deported while the claim is pending. So even if, for some other reason, let's say, a deportation order comes up, when INS checks that you have an open deportation case, an immigration judge will say, you gotta wait for that case to finish. He has an active case that he hasn't filed to prevent deportation.
It's almost better just to get that case filed in some respects, and he would actually help you out.
As long as it's a valid legal basis,
of course.
file
It's gotta be valid, but
Yep.
But that just shows that the length that we will go to protect you in terms of making these types of claims.
Correct. That's never going to be an issue, and it can't be even told to a jury if it goes to trial that you're not here legally.
Really? Yep. All right. Some final tips.
Sure.
Okay. You're an employee. You got a new job. You're young. You're starting out. Someone's watching right now. What would you tell them? Protect themselves as an employee.
The first thing, again, it's very simple to learn your rights. Get onto the New York State Department of Labor website. It has a lot of frequently asked questions that are very easily understandable. Secondly, contact a lawyer if you think you're being mistreated or improperly paid. And then finally, keep track of yourself. Keep a diary. Keep some form of record if your employer is not doing it that shows how much you're getting paid and how many hours you're working.
And most importantly, where do we find you?
Okay, so we're located in Long Island and Manhattan, but you can reach me at 212-448-9933, or the simplest way is oscarmichelen@gmail.com.
And you'll come back?
I'll come back, and we'd love to talk about other employment-related topics.
Judge Kavanaugh, who knows?
There you go. All right, thank you, David.
All right, hang on. We have to take a quick break, but don't worry. We'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this. right, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesch. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at Today's Verdict. Getting injured while on the job can be one of the most serious issues you face as an adult. What do you do when it happens to you? When do you file a claim? Well, we'll learn more about workers' compensation with attorney Stephanie Weiner. Stephanie, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, David.
Out of all the topics I get, whether it's requests for sometimes it's DWI, it could be police brutality, I get more for workers' compensation from the viewers than any other request. Okay, and there's a reason for that. Employees are constantly getting hurt on the job.
That's true.
All right, so let's start from let's start from the beginning. Okay, what rights do you have as an employee with respect to anything that could happen where you get injured? Like, is it mandatory that there's workers' compensation insurance? Let's just start a little bit from the beginning.
It is mandatory, and it's illegal not to have workers' compensation insurance. So every employer is mandated under the state to have workers' compensation insurance, and you're protected by that insurance company. You're protected by the workers' compensation law, but you have that. You can file a claim against that insurance company who your employer has a policy with.
Okay, let's say your employer doesn't have workers' compensation. What do you do then? I mean, obviously you can't file a claim. You could probably bring a lawsuit, but is that really it at that point?
No, you are still protected.
You are?
Yes, because there's an uninsured employers fund that represents, or not represents, but they take on all the cases where it's proven that the employers don't have insurance. So just because your employer does not have a workers' comp policy when you get hurt, or that's active when you get hurt, you can still file, as any other worker does, you have the right to file a claim form with the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. And if it's proven that they do not have proper workers' compensation insurance, then the unemployed insurers fund would be responsible for the claim.
Okay, so unfortunately you get injured, right? And hopefully we got to you, and now you're filing a claim. What do you put in that claim? Is it a claim for your loss of earnings? Is it a claim that you have an injury? What are you putting in there to begin with?
So you're basically claiming two separate things. You're claiming the parts of the body that you injured, or the condition. You could have a lung condition. It doesn't actually need to be a physical injury to an extremity or your neck and back. It could be a lung, it could be an eye, it could be loss of hearing. You file the claim for the actual injury that you have, and then on top of that is your loss of wages. It's also possible to get recovery even if you don't lose time from work. And if you have a permanent injury, it's also possible to get recovery for that as well.
Okay, now everybody talks about the doctors, workers' compensation doctors. I have to be approved by workers' compensation. What does that mean? I mean, why can't you just go to a doctor? I mean, how does that really work?
So the Workers' Comp Board has given authority to certain doctors to treat workers' compensation claimants. So if you go to your primary doctor, most likely they do not have workers' compensation insurance and they're not familiar with it. So a lot of times the initial place you go to is either the hospital or your primary doctor, but it's incredibly important right after that to go find a doctor that accepts workers' compensation.
Okay, so let's say you get one, right? You find this particular doctor, Dr. X. Say, Dr. X, my leg hurts me, look what happened to me. Does Dr. X then have to have approval from the Workers' Comp Board just to treat you? Can Dr. X send you for your MRIs and all the different x-rays? How does it work after that?
So there's the medical treatment guidelines that the doctors who are authorized by the Workers' Compensation Board that they have to follow. If it's an accepted claim by the insurance company, there is certain treatment under the guidelines that's mandatory that they have to provide without authorization. When it falls outside of the guidelines, when it's not automatically authorized, then you need to request authorization. And there's a process that needs to be followed. The doctors have to file certain forms, and the insurance companies have to respond within a certain amount of days. If they don't respond, and each request is different, but if they don't respond within the required time frame, then the board will likely authorize it. If the claim is not an accepted claim, it doesn't necessarily mean that the treatment won't be authorized, but we need to go to the Workers' Comp Board and request that the judge formalize the claim, and then authorize the treatment.
All right, let's skip the Workers' Comp Board for a minute, and let's go to the loss of earnings part, okay, the second little half of it. What do you need to show? You know, our last guest was talking about keeping records and making sure that you have these records. The employer should keep the records. What are you telling the employee to get, to prove, or what are you getting to prove that the employee did in fact lose this amount of income?
A lot of times the insurance company actually produces documentation. There's two separate forms that they produce. One is a wage earning form, which shows their earnings the year prior to the accident. The other form is a lost time form. It shows the lost time. If your employer is not the best at record keeping, if it's a smaller business that doesn't maintain records as well as we would like them to, then we would have them testify under oath at the workers' comp board about their lost time. And on top of that, W-2 forms, pay stubs, tax returns. If they are not paid on the books, that doesn't mean they're precluded. We could make a claim and have the person testify under oath that they were earning cash.
How do you do that? How do you prove what kind of cash you were getting or what you want? I mean, you don't take pictures of the cash that somebody gives you. Is it just your own testimony to show what you were making, really?
Hopefully, if the person filed taxes, then we have that. If it's under the threshold and the person doesn't have to file taxes, then yes, we could go and request testimony at the board. And then we ask the judge to direct the employer to produce their earnings records for that particular person.
Now, if you're injured in this particular type of way on the job, from what most people know, you can't sue your employer, correct?
Correct.
But there are exceptions. There are other things you could possibly do to be able to protect yourself and either get additional monies or do something else. What else can you do? Really?
So there's a few different things. First of all, you cannot sue your employer. That's why the statute was created, so that employers and injured workers are all protected. So you could file your workers' compensation claim. If there's a third party involved, for example, if you're in a motor vehicle accident, the person that hit you and injured you is not your employer, you can hire a personal injury attorney and file for a personal injury claim against the third party that caused the injury or had the negligence or performed the negligence. And then also there's Social Security disability that you can file for. If the person is not planning going back to work because of these injuries and they're out of work for an extended period of time and they've paid into Social Security, they certainly have the right to file for disability.
Okay, well, this brings me to a topic which clients hate to hear about. It's called liens, right? And there are liens with respect to workers' compensation, because workers' compensation is not a gift, am I correct?
Correct.
All right, so tell the viewers a little bit about that, because most viewers think they get workers' compensation, they get their money, and they never have to repay it, but that's not true.
That's not true. There's all different, it's a very complicated part of the law, and that's when you have a workers' comp case and you have a personal injury case. We always suggest having an attorney for workers' comp too, because that attorney assists the personal injury attorney in discussing what that lien is and trying to reduce it. But basically, if you have another action, a personal injury action, the workers' compensation insurance company gets to recoup the lien, which is anything they've spent on medical and your lost wages from your third-party lawsuit settlement.
Okay. So you don't get to say the double recovery that people think that you're getting.
Correct.
It's important you know that. All right, some tips, okay? Somebody's watching right now and they got injured on the job. They don't know what to do. Of course, they're going to find you. But if they don't, what are they supposed to do? First thing you would tell them to do.
I always suggest getting a workers' compensation lawyer. But beyond that, you could look at the website. The Workers' Compensation Board of New York State has a website that has a lot of information and forms. And you need to give notice. If you get hurt, even if you don't think it's serious, even if you don't think you don't need to go to a doctor and nothing's going to happen, I see plenty of people that a few weeks down the line, it starts to bother them. Give notice.
Where do we find you?
My number is 347-222-3107, and my email is sweiner, WEINER, @workerslaw.com.
All right, well, this, like I told you, everybody loves this topic, so you're coming back, even if you don't want to. All right, hang
Anytime.
on. We have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this. Hang on.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund Reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
All right, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesch. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at Today's Verdict. It's time to teach you all you need to know about opening a new business. We welcome to the show Merlyne Jean-Louis. How's that?
That's pretty good.
Okay, listen, you're talking to a guy who did not start his own business, that was taken care of by the rest of my family, and I just walked into that law firm.
Right.
But you could teach us a lot today. Okay. many people want to open a business, right? It could be who knows what kind of business. Walk us through it. Somebody is ready to start on their own. What's the first thing they should start to do?
The first thing they should do is talk to an attorney.
Okay.
To figure out what legal issues relate to their particular business.
Well, what are the types of issues that come up immediately? I know you have a sole proprietorship, you have a partnership, you have a corporation.
Right.
What do people come to you and say to you when they first want to open up a business? Do they just say, I want to be a hairdresser? What do they say to you?
Right. So like whatever type of business you have, you want to be concerned about. The number one thing is liability. If ever you're sued, you don't want someone to go after your personal assets. And that's why the LLC and corporation are the best entities I suggest for my clients to start. Because if ever they're sued, the person's supposed to go after the business assets, not their personal assets.
So they can't get the co-op on the side
Right,
or something
right.
else that is their own personal
Right, but the
monies.
caveat is you have to follow the formalities of a business. If you have a business, a corporation, you have to make sure you're conducting minutes, conducting meetings. You have an LLC, you have to make sure you have an operating agreement. You have to make sure that you have satisfied state laws related to the publication.
Well, do you incorporate for a lot of the different people that?
I really do LLC because it's easier to run. It has less formalities as compared to a corporation.
Well, okay. Let's say I came to you and I wanted to start this LLC. Do I immediately have to file something before I start my business, or could I start working? How does it usually work?
Right. So in order to form an LLC, you file something called an Articles of Organization.
Okay.
In New York. But in New York is very special because they also have something called a publication requirement. It's an old, antiquated law that made sense in the 1930s. For some reason, it still exists today. You basically have to, for a period of 6 weeks, within 4 months of starting your LLC, you have to publish in both a daily and monthly, daily and weekly publication.
What are you publishing? That you're about to start a
Saying,
business,
yeah,
and it's going to call something?
basically saying
David
that
Lesch hairdresser.
Yes, basically there's like particular language that must be included in the publication, and the publications that run it know what to tell you, know what's in there, and they tell you what you should be put in there.
All right, now you were talking a little bit about the minutes and different things. Do people have to keep those things, or can they just say they're going to keep those things?
Right, you should, because again, if ever you're sued, you don't want someone to come after you saying you form a corporation, but you're not really acting as one. And so in order to basically keep the best protection, you have to act as if you're a corporation, which means filing the minutes, filing your taxes, et cetera.
What do you find to be the biggest mistake that new businesses are making in your experience?
I want to say that they don't form an entity before starting their business. Depending what you are, like if you're a hairdresser or if you're a restaurant, you have no choice but to do that. But there are other businesses that don't necessarily require the same, capital to start, but you should still always start or consider talking to someone about the liabilities related to your particular business before starting. Because you don't want to, again, ever be sued and someone come after your personal assets.
How about insurance? Is there any insurance that you ever recommend that they get? Do you recommend that they get? Well, I mean, obviously workers' compensation insurance, because you need to get that. What else would you recommend?
You can get general liability insurance as well. You should also talk to an accountant to make sure that you get the advice what's best for tax perspective to make the decision as to what type of entity to choose.
Okay, so now somebody has their business and you've created it, and hopefully they're making money, but they're not sure. But they come back to you and they say, well, I think, Merlyne, we want to do something else. We want to add people to the business. We want to maybe move to the next level. What do you usually do for them, or what can you do for them?
Right, so you can either hire employees or you can hire independent contractors. The key is you want to make sure the distinction is correct, because with employees come certain liabilities or certain things that must be done according to the law, and the same thing with independent contractors as well. You make sure.
Well, the independent contractors, what are they doing for you? Are they doing your accounting work for you? Like, what are you hiring the independent contractors for?
Well, you can hire an independent contractor to do anything. Let's say I'm trying to think of examples.
I'm thinking let's take the hairdresser. Okay,
Right.
so you need somebody to help run your books, maybe. All right, so you need an accountant. But what other these small businesses? Because that's really in the Bronx, that seems to be what most businesses are. They're small mom and pop businesses. Who can they hire? What would you recommend in terms of their hiring to help with their business? Do you ever see businesses that are struggling that come to you?
Yeah, so I think the key is to hire someone when you need someone. You don't want to get ahead of yourself and because again, with the hiring employees and hiring independent contractors comes with other responsibilities that you must follow. So you just want to make sure you need them in the first place.
Do you ever get involved when there's actually the dispute? In other words, do you not?
No, I don't do litigation.
You don't do
I do litigation. I'm touching.
You're just kind of setting them up
I'm
to make sure that
to make sure that they don't get into are not sued at all. Actually, that's my job.
I know I'm going to spin a little bit here, but I'm kind of curious what you think. Businesses, so they say, in the Bronx has really been growing. Okay, throughout the city, yes, but more so in the Bronx than anywhere else. Do you find that in this area, in the Bronx where we are filming now, there seems to be a lot, an influx of businesses to the area, or has business slowed down for you? I could tell from your answers, I can tell whether we're doing well or not doing well. Right?
Well, I'd say that I think there is an increase in businesses. I think what has changed is there is not necessarily brick and mortar businesses. A lot of people have online businesses that are based in the Bronx.
Can you help them with? Do you help them with that as well?
Yes, I can.
And what do you tell them to do? Do they provide the information to you in person, or do they do it through email and then you create the website? Is that
right. So I normally have a consultation process where I ask all the questions to determine what their needs are and then provide a diagnosis essentially as to what they should be doing.
Okay. We don't have too much time left, so let's get into some tips. Somebody's watching right now and they're ready to start that hairdresser business or I don't know, car wash, or we talked about a lot of different things earlier. What's the first thing they should do after they see you? What are they getting together for you?
Right. Well, I think they should first actually figure out some names they want to call their business, because I would conduct a trademark search to make sure that they aren't infringing upon anyone's rights. And then once they choose the correct name, then we form the business and make sure that we're following the formalities with that business. Okay.
And most importantly, where do we find you?
You find me at mjeanlouis@jllaw.net. That's MJEANLOUIS@jllaw.net. My number is 347-946-0597.
Perfect. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and, of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also, remember, if there is a legal issue or topic you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, feel free to contact me at David Lesch at bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag #AskToday'sVerdict. From myself and all of us at Today's Verdict, always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. We'll see you next time.